All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today. I typically wait for it to go red over there before I get going, so I'm going to start again now that it's red. Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. I'm wearing a Quest 3 and using hand tracking with last generation meta avatars and the built-in microphone with software made by my colleague processing my inputs and bringing them all to you in real time live. I've got comments right in front of me and a quick thank you to our patrons. That's XR Developer News, Podum, that's the developer of Smashrooms, Holonet, Mike Manzano, Richard Meller, and Aaron Bellamy. I see everyone out there in the comments. We'll talk to you in a second. Lots of things to talk about with you. I see Onakazi out there. We'll talk with you in a second. David, what do we have today?
Yeah, hello everyone. I see a couple of people noting the new Beat Saber track that dropped. That is obviously something to be discussed on Gamescast, but today we're going to discuss hardware and industry news. So we'll start off by discussing HTC's Viverse Worlds, their kind of metaverse platform, where the unique take is that it can run in VR on any headset via your web browser using WebXR. We'll then have an Apple section where we discuss visionOS 2.4, which is coming in April, and the first feature-length Apple Immersive video, which is coming in May. So visionOS 2.4 is going to bring Apple Intelligence, a spatial gallery app, and an iPhone app with some iPhone integration for guest mode as well. And that feature-length documentary is going to be Bono Stories of Surrender. We'll then discuss Meta for Education, the end-to-end solution for schools and universities to adopt VR and mixed reality via Quest headsets. It was in beta. It's now generally available for any educational organization that wants to pay the money for it. Then we will discuss Valve Deckard, specifically a Valve leaker with a track record of revealing Valve project details in advance, claims they know the target price and that it will launch by the end of this year. So that's very interesting indeed. And finally, we will talk about PlayStation VR2. So, firstly, the bombshell news, or not if you were expecting it, PlayStation VR2's price is being cut to $400 in March. So that's just a couple of days away from now. And then we will slightly discuss my editorial that I published kind of just after the 2-year anniversary that argued that they should go even lower with a PlayStation VR2 S, a cheaper headset that takes the same strategy of Meta with Quest 3 and 3S. So some interesting news to discuss today, and we'll get into that now.
Yeah, so definitely agree that we've got a lot to discuss on the Gamescast on Tuesdays with Don Hopper. We've got right after this a video premiering, or it might even be during this show, a video premiering that we did with Don Hopper that's very similar to some of our Gamecast dev streams, so check that out. And specifically to Arlen, that's the video you're going to want to go check out right after the stream. And then we also saw what Gorn 2 is out there now. So we're going to try to take a look at that as soon as we can. That's crazy that's going to be on the way, right? So some big news sort of happening in the gaming world after kind of like a little period of depression here at the beginning of January, I guess I would call it, because of all the layoffs that have happened. But you know that there's nothing like, yeah, it's a complicated story. So Geek Godin, hello out there in the comments, and I also see the Kendrick Lamar thing. So Onakazi, I saw that they replied to us on Blue Sky to say that they had set the top score on Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar, which just dropped with minutes ago, and they've got the top score until the children get out of school from all of the from all their schools worldwide. So good, congratulations to Onakazi for their. I saw someone else saying, "Not like us." Flat screeners are not like us. That was the other comment. So let's move on here and get to our topics of the news, and definitely tune into all the other things we're doing on UploadVR.com, as well as on this channel. We're doing some really, really cool things. So, David, let's get to that first subject here, because there's some stuff later on in the show that are going to be fun to talk about. So, Viverse Worlds, you're telling me it's pretty good, right?
So I tried it and I like the unique aspect, right? So There are a lot of metaverse platforms out there now. There's Meta Horizon Worlds, VR Chat, Rec Room, Roblox. You could argue Fortnite, though we don't really care about that because it's not available in VR. And now HTC has their own. And their unique take here is that it runs in WebXR. So on any headset, any standalone headset with a web browser or on PC VR, just through your normal web browser on your PC, you can access these worlds in VR. No installing an app, no needing to have a specific headset. And I think that is pretty cool. On the detail side, this is very similar to what Meta is doing with Horizon Worlds, except obviously this is fully through the web. They have a creation tool that lets you kind of easily build worlds as a kind of simplified version of Unity, just like what Meta launched last week. Again, Meta's is an application you download on your Windows PC. This is all done in your web browser. They integrate with Sketchfab, so you can bring in your own 3D models, or you can easily access the whole Sketchfab library. They support Gaussian splats and polygon streaming. So for high fidelity models, you can bring in a splat or do HTC's server-side polygon streaming, which we haven't really talked about much in this show, but Microsoft's been using it on HoloLens for a while, and Magic Leap uses it for some things. Avatar-wise, they let you create different styles of avatars, from stylized to realistic to retro, and you can also import a VR chat style avatar, a VRM model, so it's a lot more open in that sense than Meta. Here are some screenshots. This was one of the worlds I tried out, and it ran decently well on a Quest 3's web browser, a little bit of frame drops, but very impressive visuals. This is cool, right? Like, the instant assumption is, it's HTC that made it, so it can't be cool, but I tried out one of these galleries that I assume were using Gaussian splats for some parts and polygon streaming for like detailed artworks, and it all kind of works, right? It's the same thing everyone's aiming for. Meta wants, Horizon Worlds to break out on mobile this year. HTC wants that market too. I only did try this briefly, but I think if a big tech company had done this, people would be saying really cool, but because of HTC, it's not going to get that much attention.
I'm sorry, whenever I see stuff like this, you describe so many technologies in such a short span of time. I always think of John Carmack's comment about architecture astronauts, and you'll have entitlements to this and things to that, and you'll hand off all this stuff. You talked about like pixel streaming models here. I think that's what you said, right? But like, how does that work on when you're far from the servers?
So this isn't like latency dependent. You're not talking about doing like, it's actually not pixel streaming. So pixel streaming is you're streaming the entire frame, right? So latency really, really matters. With polygon streaming, you're streaming detail into a volumetric 3D object in front of you. So it's not really dependent on latency or anything like that. Again, I tried this even on my phone out of interest, because that's the idea. This works on any device in a web browser. We have a comment here, from Ireland saying, given the walled garden nature of all these platforms, are they the new web rings? Well, HTC would argue they're using open standards, right? This is WebGL, WebXR. They're supporting all of the open model standards. HTC would argue that theirs is the most open, and I don't think anyone could argue with that. I see a comment here from Christoph, who said they just entered it now, and visually it feels much better than Horizon Worlds at first glance. And I would have to agree.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I see you go into questioning the web approach, and I totally understand WebXR dependencies. We've seen some really, really interesting things done with WebXR, but goodness, it's such a difficult thing. But the other side of that, right? How difficult is cross-platform development, right? Unity helps so many devs out there, but it's still a heavy lift to get all of your, get your thing running on 6 different platforms. And if you have any online services whatsoever, you're multiplying the complexity of what you're asking to do by 100 or 1,000-fold. I'm loving the time travelers out there. Hopefully you get caught up to present. So thank you for tuning in. David, what did you want to say there?
Oh, sure. I was just going to bring up Jonas' comment asking, I'm a bit late. What is this? This is Viverse Worlds, HTC's metaverse platform. Think of it as their version of Horizon Worlds, except it runs entirely through the web browser, including in VR. You just, even on your Quest 3 right now, you can just go into the browser, could type Viverse worlds into Google, click the first proper non-sponsored link, and jump into a world in a couple of seconds. It's pretty interesting. The other thing they do, we were discussing last week, I believe, is they allow other commerce services. So I saw them showing that they're supporting PayPal, so you could sell real objects in this using this as a show floor, and you don't need to use HTC's commerce system. So you can literally use PayPal, I assume Stripe, or anything else. In many ways, this is significantly more open and permissible than Meta's Horizon Worlds.
Permissive, yeah. So making a play for transactions, and I'm thinking back to some of that commentary from Bosworth on the idea that they need to find some traction on some of their big plans this year in order for things to work, right? I think there's a theme if you go back over the last 5 years to things like Big Screen Beyond not being able to send, or not Big Screen Beyond, Big Screen not being able to sell movies without cutting out a big share for Meta. And then this need for like selling virtual items and virtual merchandise and exchanging items in free trade online. Like that's clearly the end goal, right? Like that's what we all dream about, is being able to like have this free trade ecosystem online where like two objects can pass between two people and no one else affects that transaction. But getting there has been difficult, to say the least, I guess. I want to say hello to Fresno out there. Hello to Sweden. Hello to anyone else out there watching us in VR. We love seeing where you're tuning in from with us. And come. Be sure to tune into our Gamescast show where we've already gotten we put out a call for pets over on that show. We love seeing pets. We've already received a couple pets that people have in their homes. So send those in to Beck or Dawn, and we'll talk about that stuff over on VR Gamescast. But I just wanted to say hi to everyone out in the community who might be coming over to us from Gamescast. And just tune into some of those things we're doing with some of those day of streams as well. It was really cool. Anything else we want to talk about here?
Sure. I do think WebXR has the potential to enable some of those business models that we've talked about not being possible on these managed app-based platforms and stores. For example, I think the one weakness of this is that it is all kind of visual scripting through no code. But if HTC were to add support for like JavaScript and TypeScript, like you can in Horizon Worlds, and allow you to just bring in any API you want, theoretically, someone could build a big screen-like experience, theoretically at least, and then use their own commerce system to not be dependent on HTC there. So super interesting stuff. I think WebXR really does have the potential to allow some of this more open stuff we're talking about. But I think one of the weaknesses right now is that if you're in a headset and you want to do payment of any sort, entering your credit card or PayPal details is obviously very awkward. One of the things that's really enabled mobile commerce has been the ability to use Apple Pay and Google Pay in your browser for years now on your phone, on the mobile web. So if you were able to use some sort of Meta Pay or Pico Pay or whatever headset you're on in the web browser, which you can already do on Vision Pro, but not on Quest headsets, that would obviously go a long way. And you would imagine that the cut would be a lot less than the store cut, right? Typically, Apple Pay, Google Pay, they're taking a much, much, much smaller percentage than the likes of a store transaction. So I think we've heard some people at Meta on their web team talk about the idea of wanting to do this. And you can imagine that would really open up the WebXR ecosystem. If I can just be in my web browser on my Quest and click buy and put in my Meta pin and the transaction's done, that will open up what WebXR really needs, which is the ability to instantly and quickly monetize from Quest users.
So I was just checking in on the UploadVR conversation to see if anything has popped up around some of that news we've broken this morning. It's been a very big news day for us. We were joking last week that the Meta product manager is hitting publish on their news right as we come in here. We've got over 100 viewers tuning in. It seems like those time travelers are catching up to us. So thank you as you're catching up. Help those commenters if they're trying to figure out what we've talked about and what we haven't. That's something that frequently happens as people try to get up to the present and chat with the rest of us. I think about a lot of things like my wallet, David, right? I want my wallet in VR. It's probably the most important thing to have in VR as like your form of identity. What are the things you keep in your wallet, your identification and your payment methods. And those are like the two things that will get you to all the cool places in the real world, or to all the business in the real world that you actually need to do. And like they're the last things that the platforms are allowing us to have, basically, because it's so important. Maybe is that a fair summary? Am I right on that, David? Am I overstating that?
I mean, it depends what you mean by the last thing, right? I think specifically your payment card is going to be the thing that you get through these systems. Again, on Apple, you already get it. In Safari, on Vision Pro, you can already use Apple Pay, and it integrates with Optic ID. So by scanning your iris, you can pay for anything on the web in seconds. It's just that you're missing that on Quest and Pico right now.
Yeah, loving the conversation ongoing. We always love to see those commenters out there. If you're a silent viewer out there in the audience, don't feel pressured to speak up. We stay out there in the comment, silently out there viewing us. We love you out there too. We understand it. But also don't be afraid to speak up if you've never spoken before and have some interesting question that you haven't seen discussed on this show. We don't want to stay in echo chamber. We want to cover new things all the time. Anything else in the comments we want to talk about before we move on here, David?
I think we're ready to talk about visionOS 2.4. So this is going to be a pretty big update to Apple Vision Pro coming in April. The first beta is available now, but it doesn't have all of the features. So we're going to discuss what's going to actually be there in the real update in April, not what's in the current beta. So there's kind of 3 or 4 things that this brings. Apple Intelligence, a new spatial gallery app, and an iPhone app for remote installs, as well as a new iPhone or iPad-driven guest mode. So let's just start by quickly covering the Apple Intelligence features. So if you're not aware, Apple Intelligence is Apple's name for its generative AI features in its products. Some of these features run on device on the Apple Silicon chipset. Others are offloaded to Apple's private compute servers, which are made up of Apple Silicon. And then a couple of tasks are optionally offloaded to ChatGPT from OpenAI if you permit that. So Apple Intelligence came to iPhones, at least in its first version, late last year, the 15 Pro and beyond, as well as Apple Silicon, Macs, and iPads, but we hadn't heard anything about, is it going to come to Vision Pro? And now we know it is in April. So you're going to get on Vision Pro priority notifications and notification summaries, smart reply in messages and mail, memory movies and natural language search in photos, priority messages and mail summaries in mail, writing tools, which you see on screen right now, which lets you proofread, rewrite, summarize, or compose in pretty much any app where you're doing long form writing, an image wand in Notes, Genmoji in iMessage, and image playground. So that's the Apple Intelligence features. Then separately, the new spatial gallery app is going to be a curated collection of spatial photos, spatial videos, and panoramas from artists, filmmakers, photographers, and more. So this isn't going to be Apple's competitor to YouTube or Vimeo. This is a closed, curated platform. Apple says it's going to have perspectives from famous photographers, news stories and experiences from brands like Cirque du Soleil, Red Bull, and Porsche, and behind-the-scene moments from Apple originals like Severance and Shrinking, as well as special moments from top artists. So this is about giving you spatial videos and photos to actually view, because, if you either don't have an iPhone that can capture them, or you just don't really capture many photos yourself, the ability to kind of see these spatial photos aren't much use to you. So Apple wants to really surface some high-quality content. Then the Vision Pro app is cool because primarily you can remote install apps, right? If you see a new Vision Pro app on the web somewhere, or on social media, someone sends it to you, you don't have to actually go into your Vision Pro and install it anymore. As long as your Vision Pro is on, you connect the battery to power or whatever, you can just schedule those to install from the app. It'll also let you, browse the best new visionOS content from the iPhone app. And then for me, what I think the coolest feature that's coming here is the iPhone driven guest experience. So instead of having to put on the Vision Pro and then enable guest mode, select the app, start the casting, you can just get the person to put the headset on their head, and then and do this guest prompting from your iPhone nearby, including selecting what apps and the AirPlay. And I think this is going to be great because it's going to make Vision Pro demos so much easier. And I think Quest should get this too, right? Quest should have a guest mode as well. Every headset that isn't something like Big Screen Beyond that you can't share with someone else realistically should have some kind of guest mode.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about the ideas that could be ahead here for things like an Apple Vision headset, right? Imagine the Pro not being on there, and you've got the Apple Vision app that gets installed to your device, a lower cost device that's up front, and now you've got your combo in your hands. You've got your phone and your headset working together, work uh, very well. I'm looking at the comments. I see VR Gamer Dude, Don Hopper out there has just tuned in, and I'm looking at Slack right now as well as he is dealing with a USB issue on his PC because we want to get him into Gorn 2 if we can, but not if his PC is on life support. So we'll see how that works today. I'm looking at Brandon Jones's comments here, and they're very, very interesting. And we're going to have to go back to that last subject a little bit to address those comments. Is there anything else you want to talk about here about visionOS 2.4 before I talk about what Brandon is talking about out there?
No, I think we've pretty much covered this. We'll go into more detail when it launches in April, but I think, if you are someone in the Apple ecosystem and you were finding some of these features to be sorely missing, this is going to be great for Vision Pro owners. But yeah, let's talk about those comments from Brandon, who is very much so a prominent figure in the web XR community.
Yeah, so several comments here in discussion with Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop here, about the performance issues or the performance limitations, I should say, capabilities of WebXR. And so it's not equivalent to the performance of native languages, Brandon says, but it's made massive improvements with things like WebAssembly. It gets even closer. And the crucial thing is you can't provoke the same type of memory issues as a native language. This is what's fascinating for me. This is what I want to think about here as a community with you, David, and with our audience here. It feels like WebXR is the right platform for objects in VR for like weapons, tools, things that you hold, pull out of your wallet. WebXR feels like that's a great place to do that, because if the performance degrades on the thing in your hand, I'm not going to complain as much as if the performance degrades on my head movements. So I'd be curious what Guy, who's worked with performance issues for a decade, what Brandon, who has a very good insight into the WebXR community, and what you, David, have to say on this idea of WebXR being the right platform for, I don't know, floating objects, volumetric objects in VR that we share between us.
Yeah, until you said the share between us part, I was with you.
Yeah.
It's certainly an interesting idea. Could you take the kind of promised Quest 3 augments that Meta has obviously very much so shifted and delayed to a WebXR approach, right? Could you implement that way in the same way that Apple has volumes within their shared space? Valve has actually been experimenting with this, or at least one Valve engineer was experimenting with this for Steam VR, that you would have WebXR as the technology here. But right now, the way WebXR is implemented, in my understanding, is that it is one immersive session that takes over your entire view. It's not designed to have like multiple WebXR instances running side by side. What I find interesting about what Brandon Jones is saying in the comments is that while today with WebGL, which is like the web version of OpenGL, we're already seeing decent performance gains in WebXR experiences. What will be coming in future is WebGPU, and that's like the web equivalent of Vulkan. So if you're not familiar with that, these are graphics APIs that developers use. OpenGL was kind of the old open one, and the new open one is Vulkan, and Vulkan lets you go a lot lower level. And because of that, you can actually get better performance. So once web developers get WebGPU, they should be able to make their 3D experiences, including WebXR experiences, even higher performance than before.
So LL is threatening to send us down the rabbit hole of terminology, but I'm just going to say we are in virtual reality right now, and it is the place I go when I turn the dial on my Apple Vision Pro headset to the moon. It's the place I go when I set my home environment in the Meta Quest 3S to be the opening level of Metal Gear Solid. When my home space is the Metal Gear Solid helipad, right? That's where I go. I go to virtual reality. So I'm now, it's now just funny to me to answer that question out there. It's now just funny to me because all that marketing to me is just demonstrative to me of companies trying to say, our reach is this wide. We are reaching this wide across everything. We will not stop until our arms are around this much. And I don't know, man. You can't, I'm on the moon, right? Like you can't get me here, right? Like that's it. Like your reach can't go any further than that. So I don't know. I just wanted to respond that in a very philosophical way rather than us going down that rabbit hole.
Sure, yeah. LL, we did discuss that a little bit last week. It was one of our topics, actually. Meta starting to call everything MR. Both Meta and Apple kind of use this term immersive experiences or fully immersive to mean VR. It's a little bit frustrating for sure. We'll have to see what Google and Samsung do. Right now, they're obviously using XR as the catch-all term for all of this. Just most companies use XR for the catch-all term for everything above, but we don't really know how they're going to categorize. So far, they're just using the same old fully immersive. But what really matters is not what these companies use, but what do people use in the end, right? What do average buyers of these headsets use? So thanks for the donation from FMeister94. They say they're testing the Pico 4 Ultra beta operating system version recently released that lets you move the windows in the Z-axis. This was something we criticized in our Pico 4 Ultra hands-on. And yes, we do plan to cover that update once it goes to the stable channel, once they figure out what they're taking a beta and shipping, because it is great to see them do that in their home experience. And as I've said before, Pico 4 Ultra is an excellent headset that's just unfortunately torpedoed by the fact that it can't be sold in North America.
Yeah, so I'm curious, this next one, we should probably just cover it real quick. It's going to be an interesting one, but there's a very long history of Apple partnering with U2, right? And there's very stories out there on the internet with people getting an album put on their phones and getting very upset about that album suddenly being installed on their phones. Is that right? Remind me of all this stuff, David. I'm sure you have memories of some of this stuff, but break this story down for us and remind me of that history that I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people bringing up that history in response to this story because it was that time that Apple added a free U2 album to everyone's iTunes. And a lot of people who weren't U2 fans didn't really appreciate getting this for free. And there was a lot of controversy. I remember, remember back when that was a big controversy in a week, right? A company putting a album into your library. But I mean, it brought up a lot of interesting tech journalism questions that do permeate to today of what is your library? Do you control it? Is it Apple's library? And then
Kindle just took away the ability. What was it? That's a big thing of you could download your Kindle books, but now you can no longer download your Kindle books. There were stories of, I don't know if it was Fahrenheit 451 or the other famous dystopian ones that got deleted from some Kindles over the years. They had to be reinstated because the listing was removed and Amazon reached in there. I got to reach a little bit further into history, right? The turn of the century 2000, you probably never had an iMac, but that was when Steve Jobs was coming back to Apple and iTunes came preloaded with a stack of songs, like 50 or so songs or something. And if I had $1 million, right, I got that playlist burned into my brain because so many schools across the country installed those Macs in their computer labs or their design labs. And so you had a nice little set of music in iTunes that you could listen to. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to see Anakazi's comments. Interesting. They are being a little bit harsher than us, saying it was a PR disaster for Apple at a time when iPhone's default storage was 16 or 32 gigs. Adding an entire album to people's library that would then get easily synced over wasn't taken very well by people. But let's get on to the actual news story we're talking about today. Why are we talking about U2? You may be wondering, especially if you're on the audio podcast where you can't see on screen. And the answer is that Apple has announced the first feature-length Apple Immersive video. So recently, in October, we had Submerged, which was the first scripted short film, and it was 16 minutes long, right? And then in November, we had the first Apple immersive music video from The Weeknd, which was 5 minutes long. So Apple is suggesting that Bono, Stories of Surrender, which is coming out on May 30th, will be far longer than either of those and be a full feature-length documentary based on obviously Bono. And I think this is a very similar title to his memoir. So they haven't really gone into a lot of details about exactly what this is going to be, but we will be reporting on it when it comes out in May. And its significance, again, is that it will be the first feature-length Apple immersive video.
So what's fascinating here, and I want us to think about in broad strokes, right? If there's someone at Meta who wants to come here and disagree with this take, go ahead. If there's someone from Apple that wants to disagree with this take, go ahead. It's very interesting to see these singular projects release. One scripted short, one scripted one full length documentary, one example, and they're releasing these to their communities in a drip fashion, where the community out there is like, I want more. This is torture. Why aren't you giving us enough? It's not an A/B test, is I guess what I want to point out here. Meta is known for doing A/B tests. I was there in the audience when I think it was Nate Mitchell came out and explained to a bunch of journalists, the Rift S is $400, the Quest is $400, and that's where we are. We're going at this forward. So Meta ran an A/B test, in my opinion, on those two platforms, and it picked one, right? And then they found a way is to integrate Rift features into the Quest, and the rest is history. But my point is that's Meta's track record here is A/B tests of products where we get one of these verticals at a time being tested on their audience. Gears and Goo is a gaming piece of content we've talked about on the Gamescast. That was a very good piece of content, but it was similar. Like David, like there's a real pattern here of like one or two nice tentpole productions a month from the Apple ecosystem, sort of funded by Apple and then released to the Apple ecosystem, and like. To my eyes, that gives them time to build a nice little report for the executives that says, so-and-so said this about this product, so-and-so said this about this product. And then right below those, that human element, there's a chart that says also it had this many views and this much engagement, right? Like that's all there too. But I'm just trying to suggest that there might be a different approach to the analysis of the data.
Yeah, I'm sure Apple is looking at these immersive videos and saying, which ones do people view? Do they come back and review them? Do they like the documentaries, the scripted ones, the music ones? What do people engage with? But I think majority of the reason that we're getting these kind of drip fed is just that these are very expensive productions. And until pretty much this month, the only way to do it was to get a contract with Apple, rent out cameras from Apple that come from that next VR acquisition, and then use kind of beta, even alpha versions of production software to work with this kind of video. That's why we keep going on about why it's so important that this Blackmagic camera is out now for recording Apple Immersive Video, and that they are integrating support for editing Apple Immersive Video into their DaVinci Resolve software. That's why this is so significant. $30,000 is a lot for us, but for a production studio to be able to start working with this new format, this is nothing. This is a expense they will absolutely easily pay. I can see a bunch of different media studios buying one of these and getting into this and making their own documentaries now. And that's when we'll see this no longer be a drip feed system. That's when we'll see, new ones coming out multiple times a week, maybe even daily. And then the pace will increase as the cost of production and as the experience people have with working with this comes down.
Yeah, so next week I'm going to attempt my first spatial video interview. So I'm gonna attempt. We'll see if it ends up in front of the audience here, if it's good enough for publication, right? But I'm gonna wear my Vision Pro to an interview and sit there for 20 to 30 minutes with my head very still, with very nice lighting, and see how it comes out. But it's the similar sort of thinking from my perspective, right? When does it make sense for us to do all of our videos in spatial video? When does it make sense to do some of them? Isn't clear to even us, right? It wouldn't be clear to them either. Um, yeah, interesting stuff. Anything
Yeah.
else here you want to discuss?
No, I was just going to say that it's actually an interesting idea. Even with spatial video, which, to be clear to our audience, what we're talking about with this story and the Bono thing is immersive video, 180 degrees, 3D, 8K per eye. But even with spatial video, there are challenges to having that adopted. And spatial video is still 3D, but it's just regular rectangular video. Otherwise, right now, if you wanted to distribute that, you would have to use Vimeo. Or you could convert it to regular side-by-side 3D and put it on YouTube, but you get some quality loss there, and that would be a problem. But it's
And then Safari has the distribution, right? Like, won't it come up in
sorry,
Safari at some point? The spatial videos.
spatial photos are supported
Oh,
in
okay.
Safari.
Sorry.
Perhaps videos have come as well. I haven't checked that, but for now I know that spatial photos are for soon. But that's even talking about the production pipeline for spatial videos, and to edit that, right, you would have to use Apple's Final Cut Pro software if you want to edit that spatial video directly out of your Apple Vision Pro, which is $300 software the last I checked, or roughly that sort of price. So then if you wanted to edit, film and edit this in true Apple immersive video, which is a completely different ballgame, you're going to need a $30,000 camera and DaVinci Resolve. So there is just this point where the production tools need to kind of percolate out into the creation community. And RG is saying, but are there even standards for VR film? It depends what you mean by standards, right? Apple Immersive Video is a format. They've got it implemented in this camera. They've got it implemented in DaVinci Resolve. But what if you want to publish on other platforms? No, you're going to need to use standard VR 180, which has been a thing for a very long time, but has its own drawbacks in comparison. And then we have other companies like we covered last week, spinning up their own immersive encoder to produce even better quality than Apple Immersive Video. So right now there isn't a standard behind any of this that is cross-platform and adopted by everyone now.
So I don't know how much of a rabbit hole we want to go down here, but in addition to that question of if there are other standards for VR film, LL is saying, is the future these specialized expensive equipment or regular equipment and having AI immersify it? Well, actually, what we're seeing is it going to both. And the question is, which one do you want to spend money to go to see? Right? Like, that's always the question. It's always been the question of VR, period. How do we build this engine? There's some very interesting discussions. If you go follow what the Boneworks developer out there discussing the finances of funding a game and like the threshold you need to make in sales in order to make a profit on the game. Those are real numbers to justify real teams and real production values. So how many of these types of cameras do you want to put on a set versus how many iPhones that are, the moment that you see the footage from that camera, it was shot by that camera. You don't want that. You don't want it as a creative. So it's all meeting in the middle, but the question is like what type of camera system wins out? Where do the economics of mass market get applied? Because whoever wins this journey is also going to be able to apply that to everyone else. So at the end of the day, you've got really like the layman person out there doesn't understand how any of this works. I watched a whole person do an entire video where they felt like they had looked into a portal because they were getting fitted for a wedding dress and they had their phone in panorama mode, I think it was, taking a panorama of them in front of the mirrors. And so it was taking multiple frames as it went across of this scene. But as she's looking back on this photo, she's a single frame with her hands in different positions in each of the mirrors that are in front of her as she's getting fitted for a dress. And it's like, how does this work? And you see a bunch of videos out there that are like, how do mirrors work, right? Like there's a fair number of people who don't have basic concepts of how physics and the world works. And like now we're talking about these types of cameras capturing reality for us when AI can do the same, right? Like I like that, David. Go ahead.
Well, let's just address LL's comment, their question, which was, is the future these specialized, expensive equipment or using regular equipment and having AI immersified? So we're talking about capturing, you know, two perspectives in 180 degrees. Um, you could say, why not just capture two perspectives with the regular field of view camera and then hallucinate the periphery? That's not going to work very well. You could, do a little bit of periphery push with AI, and we've seen people do that. For example, converting old movies into vertical videos for TikTok, and it can kind of work if you're in a very static frame where the stuff you're generating is like the sky or the bottom of a hangar or something. But if you're talking about like capturing a nature documentary, hallucinating all of that extra detail is just not going to be stable and coherent. And that's not what people want anyway, right? You're watching this immersive video to take you to the depths of a rainforest or, the shores of a sea where people are Arctic surfing or deep underwater. The whole point is that you're seeing something on the other side of the planet that is real. If you wanted something not real, you would go into something completely virtual, right? But more broadly addressing this question, do we need these expensive cameras? Could you theoretically just put like a wide angle lens on your iPhone? You could, but you have to realize that the pixel count we're talking about here and the frame rate is really quite astounding, right? Your iPhone is capturing, 4K 60 FPS, in some cases 4K 120. This is 8K per eye at 90 frames per second. The other thing is that this is very, very high bit rate. It's high dynamic range. Sure, you get that on an iPhone. The stops of dynamic range, though, that these cameras can capture are incredible. So you can get the brightest brights and the darkest darks all in the same capture. For the same reason that, on a movie production, they're using these expensive red cameras, you're going to want cameras like this for capturing the best quality immersive video for a long, long time. Because you have to remember, this isn't something you're seeing in a little rectangle on your hand. You're seeing this projected over the front of your entire field of view in these headsets, right? The entire field of view of the headset, if you're looking forward. So any imperfections on any level of capture, you're going to see them instantly. You're going to see it. And that's been the problem with me for immersive video for years and years. These cameras haven't been good enough. And you have seen all these imperfections and the compression artifacts and the lack of dynamic range and the low resolution and all of these things. And it's only once we have got these good cameras doing this that we get this to be high quality. And that's why I find Apple Immersive Video so much better than what came before. So maybe one day on the very, very long scale, you're going to get AI be able to magically kind of outpaint all of this and do all the stereo synthesize, but not anytime soon.
It's really interesting to think that, right, what is inside the frame is always going to look better than what's outside the frame. Or what's outside the frame is always going to be a little bit hallucinated. Like there's two ways to think about how that might go forward. Yeah. These next three subjects are very, very cool, and I think we're going to have big sections of discussion on each of them. This first one, I've been chatting with some people offline about it, so I'm excited to talk about that with you, David, because I think it's actually a pretty impactful bit of news to talk about an area of VR that people don't talk about too often, and that's education. That is the role of VR in education. It is a big deal, and it is. Gosh, I'll argue it's bigger than VR gaming, but I'll go ahead and get yelled at by all of you for that by saying that right now. So, David, why don't you tell us what this latest news is, and I'll tell you why I think it's bigger than VR gaming.
Oh, that's a very interesting take. I'm excited to discuss that actually. So this is Meta launching Meta for Education, their end-to-end solution for schools, universities, and colleges to be able to adopt and, most importantly, mass manage Quest headsets. So this is built on Meta Horizon Managed Solutions, which was formerly known as Quest for Business. And that's the project or the program where if you're a business, you're an enterprise, you can mass buy Quest headsets and then manage them in a web interface at mass scale. So you don't have to go into each headset and do all the updates and setup. You don't have to like manually install apps. You can, be able to just with all of these headsets say, which apps do I want to be available? There's a streamlined, simplified interface And then you can either use, in the business case, individual mode, which is what kind of like what we all use in Horizon OS, or shared mode, which is what education will use, where these headsets are designed to not be attached to an individual Meta account. They are considered, devices that are shared by many people, and you can kind of restart the session. Again, there's a streamlined interface with only these specific apps, and Meta's partnered with a bunch of educational organizations to kind of bring in the apps that people need. So under this scheme, educational organizations can get a Quest 3 for $630. That includes 24 months of this managed service backend, or for $100 extra, they get lifetime access to that managed service. They get the headset and lifetime managed. For Quest 3S, those values are $400 and $500. So $400 for the headset on 2 years, or an extra $100 for lifetime. Businesses don't get that. That's just for education. If you just bought the 2-year package, afterwards it would be $24 per month per headset. So I imagine a lot of schools are just going to buy, that lifetime package. So according to Meta, of the 43 schools already using VR and mixed reality, 87% of students reported feeling more engaged and interested in their lessons. 85% of teachers found it to be a valuable tool to enhance their teaching. And students also experienced a 15% improvement in their academic performance on multiple choice assessments. So that's according to Meta. The background context I want to add here before we get into our discussion is, as a lot of the old timers in the comments will know, personal computers were introduced to tens, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world in schools. For a lot of people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, and even in many parts of the world in the 2000s, the first personal computer they used was the one in their school. And Apple was very active around this in the 80s and 90s. They even made versions of their Macs, eMacs and Education Macs, that were specifically designed for education. And a lot of the kind of adoption and mainstream sticking power of the Mac brand was established in schools. So Meta is very much so hoping to do the same, I think, across both secondary and tertiary education.
So I've been talking with some installers out there who install VR headsets in schools. Don't want to name them because I haven't really talked to them about going on the record just yet. But it's been a fascinating insight into these installs. And they, to my knowledge, have been using a lot of Pico headsets because of how the management systems have worked for Pico being so friendly to kind of remote setup or remote management.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. Meta hasn't had this for education until now. So there have been people that have been doing this, but they've been manually managing or using their own kind of hacked together software to manage this. So the difference here is that now it's all kind of seamless. I've spoken to some people too that have used this in business, and they say it's great. They have all of this ability to, mass manage exactly which apps are used, exactly what can be used. You can, update all the headsets, and all that just works very well.
I'm seeing people out there talking about Orion Drift. That is something we will definitely get into in depth over on Gamescast. It is a big launch from a big studio with a big idea. We've seen it rolling in for a while. In fact, we will try even to get some of the people over behind another Axiom into the studio, into our format, so we can really dive into it. I don't know if we'll be successful in that, but I think we really need to unfold the story of what they're trying to do there in the format that we've been trying to get into. So yeah, do keep that discussion going in the comments there on Orion Drift, because it is interesting. And then this education subject, and my suggestion that it's bigger than gaming. My office has been a work in progress for at least a year and a half now, and I'm closing in on the final shape of my office. And right now, the shape of the office is right here. Right, this is one end of my office, and this is the other end. Okay, that's the square distance I have to work in for VR. Right, I can rotate around in a chair freely. I'm good to go on that. And on the outside of this play space, I'm putting a musical keyboard that connects over USB, a MIDI keyboard. I'm putting a guitar up on the wall behind the clothes. I'm putting a mock rifle, a blaster gun that I've received. I'm putting that up in the wall, and I'm also putting a handset. The company calls it a handset, but it is a fully weighted handgun with the Quest 3 controller turned around backwards on the top, placed right where the firing chamber would be on a real gun. So when I pull the trigger on this gun, it will pull the trigger on the Quest 3 controller, and I'll get a haptic effect. I should get a haptic effect with each shot that way. In this way, it's called that product is called Ace Virtual Shooting. I'll be assessing it in the weeks ahead. VR Gamer Dude out there has one of these blasters as well from Stryker. What else do I have around me that I can train with? I also have a piece of paper and a pencil, right? I also have a piece of paper I can pull out right here, and both in Touch Desk, I could trace on it over on Apple Vision Pro, or pencil with MetaQuest. I can train and practice to do art. I've never learned to play. I tried to learn to play guitar once when I was like, I don't know, 10 years old. I haven't really put in the time again. And at some point, I decided to not put in the time again until the software existed to teach me how to play guitar with my VR headset. I chose at some point in the last 5 years to not learn how to play piano until it gets Beat Saberified. And these are all the exact same things that you can do in every school around the world with a VR headset with pass-through on it, letting you see the tools around you and then showing you how to operate them. Shop class. You gave a description of what shop class should look like in the future on a previous VR download episode, David, as you described having an engine in front of you and this computer-aided system trying to tell you what's wrong. That same system can test you, right? At the same time that it can aid you, it can also say, actually, you tell me what's wrong with this, okay? Maybe you need to look underneath the engine on this one. Maybe that's the hint, right? The AI can now guide you to so this we're now officially, if we had the photo in our records, we should have I Know Kung Fu from the Matrix up here on the screen, because we haven't, like, this sounds like a dream, but it will happen when the software gets good enough. We've already seen, you read off some of the stats, but Walmart and Fortune 500 companies, they're already chasing some of those stats and efficiencies. The only reason in my mind that education is not bigger than gaming is because no one has spent the money on it and put it as the focus.
Yeah, I think cost is certainly a big problem for many schools. Even at these prices, right? You're talking about $500 for a Quest 3S for lifetime, or $730 for a Quest 3 for lifetime. That's a lot for schools. If you look at the devices that many schools buy, they're iPads that they get at Education Bundle, sometimes for effectively $200. They're Chromebooks that can be $150, $200. So this is going to be limited in its deployment until we get even lower cost headsets, or until these ones get cheaper over time. But when it comes to the use cases of this, I think science is one of them, right? There's so many situations in chemistry, in biology, in physics, where seeing something in 3D and having that visualized and mixed reality in the classroom is going to be a game changer.
I wish, did you see our Tablecraft video, David?
Sorry, Tablecraft, no.
Yeah, so I wish I could pull it up, but like, we've got a video a couple back where we talked to Raphael, who is in our audience a lot of the time, the developer of Not Suspicious, or the studio is Not Suspicious, and we always talk about Airspace Defender, but they built a game called Tablecraft, and we've got a tour to go back for a few in our videos to it, where it's the first part of it was Airspace Defender, but then he took us into Tablecraft. And Tablecraft, over there positioned almost in exactly the same spot as your TV, is a periodic table of the elements. And right in front of you, right around where your tablets are right here, he has a table where, like, various objects pop out representing the various elements and the various reactions they can have with one another. And there's a cube representing every single element that you end up putting on this table, on this periodic table of the elements. While Don Hopper and I were going through this, I'm looking at this table over there, right? This wall, and realizing this design would be great. That wall that these got over there would be amazing to show on a tablet. And all the kids in the classroom are looking at this periodic table and going, Jimmy, why don't you go try carbon, right? Or they could press the carbon button on their iPad to prompt the kid who's in the headset to go do that thing. You can have amazing interactions that way. This was already designed. This is what this developer built it for. It's on our channel. Hugely impactful, great idea. But that developer has struggled with the same thing that all the other devs on the store are struggling with, which is people eyeballing or finding the project.
Yeah, having interactions where you only need enough headsets for half of the classroom or for a third, and you have other people outside of the headset directing and helping with the tablet are certainly possible. But I think ideally, if you do get everyone in the headset, as they're showing in this kind of trial of certain schools, the ability to manipulate and show these models in mixed reality, in 3D for everyone in the room to see is just a game changer. Again, imagine teaching certain biological processes by showing them in the air, in space, in mixed reality in 3D, or chemical structures or bonds or processes in physics. On the VR side, we're just talking about mixed reality co-located in the room. On the VR side, history, for example, we've seen some people in the audience bring up where you could take the entire classroom back to a recreation of a historical setting or event, so they can kind of live in it in a way that's much cheaper, actually, than doing a kind of class outing in many ways, in most cases, especially when the topic you're talking about may be on the other side of the world. I do think the potential here is incredibly untapped and just starting to be approached. And I'm sure everyone in the audience can think of a dozen different things in which, we have Marcellus Wilson saying, I studied anatomy for art 3 times, but I finally got it when I could walk around 3D models in the Poser app while watching lessons on a large multitasking screen. There are so many situations in which seeing something in 3D space in front of you would just be a dramatically more intuitive way to understand it than trying to parse an old textbook.
It's kind of wild. Like my brain, I've met people who tried to upgrade the technology at their school districts, and it's a complicated thing. You've got an internet connected device, and you've got to lock it down for security reasons, and then you've also got to like make sure the thing is protected for years on end and replaceable. That the thing you are using in year 1 of the project, you can still replace at year 7 of the project. It's horrible, an incredibly complex thing. But like I'm seeing in our like I saw iPads. People were able to get all of their medical students, right? Medical students in college, or in their medical study after college, spend thousands and thousands of dollars on physical textbooks that they could now put on their iPad about 15 years ago for the first time. And it was only really about 15 years ago that became an ability. And like, can you imagine the difference for lugging around 4 giant medical textbooks versus just lugging around this thin little iPad? That change has occurred, but like, that's not the change we're talking about here. We're talking about the next change beyond that, which is like actually analyzing 3D anatomy wherever you are and pulling a liver out of a body and seeing what's underneath, right? Like you could do that anywhere with a VR headset.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of once a month needing to go to the kind of surgery dummy, they would be able to
Cadavers,
do
right?
this. Yeah, exactly. Or cadavers. Some universities have cadavers. Some of them let you access it, once every couple of months. Imagine when there's something they don't understand, they can do this at home in their room with their own headset, or they can do it in the classroom at any time with everyone at once. I do think the potential here is really, really incredible. And I can't wait to see what developers do around this, because there are going to be developers that see this opportunity, that see that, you were talking about having to lock down headsets there. Well, that's something that this Meta for Education lets you do. It lets you disable the browser, disable any other apps except for the ones you're using, and lets the teacher see from a web interface what is everyone running at the moment.
So some very dystopian ideas being explored out in their comments, and I weigh those dystopian ideas. People talking about politics as well and the changing face of the American landscape. I want to point you to Experience on Demand by Jeremy Bailenson at Stanford. About a decade ago, I think that was the book. He wrote two books, and I could be mixing up the two of them. Um, but there was a book that I pulled up about a decade ago now when I was making the decision wholeheartedly to just I'm gonna make a go at writing about VR as a freelancer. The first thing I did was get his book and pop it open and go over those things. And I think that was the book that relayed some of this research they had done at Stanford, where where you could very much have a teacher when I lay this out for you, you're going to picture it with AR glasses. You're gonna picture it with see-through optical AR glasses because that's the model in our head that isn't so dystopian. But what you could actually have is a teacher up at the front of the class with 30 students in front of them, and this teacher has a little meter above every student's head that indicates how engaged that student is in the material. And you can't fathom it right now, but you can imagine the software helping to nudge the students back to attention on the teacher. So one of the examples that they showed in the study that they had studied was when the teacher's making eye contact. I'm making eye contact with you right now through this camera, right? When the teacher makes eye contact with the students, the people on the other end of the avatar pay more attention. It's wild. They've got studies that show this, right? So why don't you just fake the attention of the teacher so that the teacher appears like they're looking at all 30 students simultaneously? Because that would be creepy as hell, right? We're not ready for it. But you can imagine other nudges. You can imagine software trying to push us in that direction.
Yeah, I think in this in-classroom stuff for now, a lot of teachers and organizations are going to go for mixed reality rather than full VR, if for nothing because it's quite impractical to have an entire classroom in VR and not be able to kind of coordinate with those around them. But you certainly could imagine what VR classrooms might look like. Obviously, we have to bring up the kind of Ready Player One situation where schools don't exist and everyone kind of attends school in VR. You could imagine that today, for people who are terminally ill or bedbound or have other serious disabilities that require them to be homeschooled today, is it possible that there could be virtual schools opened that these people would be able to attend, these children would be able to attend? That's kind of fascinating. The other thing is that like you could theoretically then do exams remotely like this as well once you get eye tracking in these headsets, because then you know that the person that's in that headset is the person who they claim they are through, for example, an Apple Vision Pro optic ID. Right? Right now in Quest, that wouldn't really be practical, but you can imagine even taking exams like this in future.
Do you all remember Ender's Game? Ender's Game. We talk about Ender's Game a lot because Echo VR is essentially Ender's Game, the game that they play in orbit for their training. Beautiful, beautiful book, beautiful writing in that book because of the way it describes that zero-G sport. You can picture the whole sport out in your head without actually going. And now you can go into Echo Arena, or you could go into Echo Arena, and we hope Orion Drift brings it back. I think they will eventually. We'll see. But they talk about a monitor that gets installed in children in that book, which is pretty scary, right? And all these people that watch out the monitor all the time. I'm very much describing that, the same technology can be used in the very same way. The Matrix room the architect is in with the 80 TVs on the wall. You can imagine a scenario where all 30 students have each of their views projected onto the Matrix architect's wall, and you can see everything the student sees. And I'm thinking very specifically of the Pledge of Allegiance, right? The way you start off every day in America. You are forced to read the Pledge of Allegiance and put your hand over your heart. And there's a long history of a couple words that either get included or don't get included in that Pledge of Allegiance based on whoever is politically in power in a particular period of time. Most students, they mumble their way through it every morning, right? Some students shut up through that. They've made up the decision at age 10, 12, 14. I am not going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to quietly just disappear into the crowd here and make my quiet little stand. I remember having an argument in high school with one of my teachers about this, right? He was very adamant that all the students needed to say this, right? Think about what I'm describing here to you. If every student in the class is wearing a VR headset, you don't allow the freedom for the one student to make that one ploy. Like, did you say the Pledge of Allegiance at 100% with everyone else today, kids? No, you didn't. You didn't give it all your heart. All right, let's move on here.
Yeah, I think we should point out that these are worst case scenarios. None of the teams that are currently working to bring education to schools are doing any kind of real-time monitoring or anything like that. And theoretically, you could do that with a camera and computer vision, right? You could put a camera up in the corner of the classroom and monitor what each person's lips are doing. You wouldn't need VR in theory for that. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring it back to that. Of course, these are things we should think about, and that these are worst case scenarios, but that's not what anyone in the space currently that I'm aware of is exploring. There's a comment here that from LL referencing a YC company that was posting last week about factory managing software, and it was employee 17, and they were kind of monitoring, micromanaging what they were doing, and so they're bringing up that in the context of students. But yeah, we should say that is happening today already without any need for any headsets of any sort.
Yeah, well, that is meta for education discussion for today, and I appreciate David's qualifier here that we're not talking about, that's a worst case scenario. Think about the real world. I've been thinking about that old adage that we all hold to our heart. The future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. Well, there's a very real possibility that the dystopian scenarios that we discuss in this show end up happening somewhere in the world at some point in time, right? Like that's the very, very scary thing to consider. All right. The Valve leaker. All right. This is a big one. Hit that like button, boost our numbers, make this go crazy, because everyone has been waiting for this. David, why do we believe this is real?
Yeah, so we don't know if it is real or not, but this does come from a Valve leaker called Gabe Follower, who has successfully revealed details of multiple unannounced Valve projects in the past, including Counter-Strike 2 and Deadlock. And so they are claiming now that several people have told them that Valve aims to release its wireless standalone headset running SteamOS, codenamed Deckard, that we've been talking about for years now, by the end of this year, with a target price of $1,200 for the full bundle headset and controllers. And this will apparently include first-party games or demos. It's quite a wide net there. Interestingly, they claim that this $1,200 price will see it sold at a loss. So that suggests that Valve is going to put some really high-end specs into this thing, but try to keep the price somewhat kind of accessible. We can argue about that, and we will argue about that soon. But the context I want to just put in here first is that the fact that Valve is working on a new headset is not in itself a rumor. Valve has repeatedly confirmed over the years that it is working on a new headset. Gabe Newell has talked about making big investments in new headsets. Valve has posted job listings for engineers to help prototype, ship, and support a VR headset for, quote, millions of customers worldwide. Valve product designers have told news outlets and interviews that they are working on VR headsets, direct quote, working on VR headsets. And in 2023, late 2023, Valve strongly hinted that this headset would have a strong focus on wireless PC VR streaming, which data mining in Steam VR has suggested. So that it's not a rumor that they're working on a headset, but the details are the rumor part. And we should mention the other context, which is that this comes just 3 months after the controllers for this headset, codenamed Roy, are discovered in the Steam VR driver files. So we saw these models in Steam VR for the controllers for this headset. They revealed that this thing would have a D-pad and bumpers, with the likely purpose of that being so that you can play flat screen games without a gamepad. So you can use these two together as a gamepad. And according to this leaker, the same person who claims $1,200, that will be a core function of this headset, playing your traditional PC games from Steam on a gigantic monitor in front of you.
So thank you for the donation from Longshot, saying that they love the Apple Vision Pro, Valve, and high-end hardware coverage. Your show is a great escape for me from the rest of the news. Thank you again for all the hard work and amazing journalism. Truly grateful. Thank you for noticing us. Thank you for seeing us, and we hope you recognize we love seeing you guys too. We love seeing this audience and understanding where you're all coming from. Yeah, so what are the chances Valve leaked this on purpose to test the number, to test the 1200?
I think it's unlikely. Valve has been a very secretive company throughout its lifetime. It very much so is one of those, we'll announce it when it's ready. I don't think Valve is the type to tease things. I doubt that. It just is. There are always going to be leaky ships, right? Even Apple, who is a famously secretive company that will fire employees and sue people for leaking things. Even Apple today, pretty much everything they're about to do leaks, specifically to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, right? We talk about it almost every week on this show, a new detail of Apple. The thing about the Valve Deckard headset is we still don't really know exactly what it's going to be, right? We know from pretty much all of these rumors that it's going to be wireless and standalone in its base capability. So theoretically, it will run without a PC. But the big question for me is, will it be focused on running VR without a PC, or will it be focusing on streaming wirelessly VR from your existing gaming PC? Because these are going to be very, very different products, right? There is a possibility that this thing is standalone in the sense that, without connecting it to a PC, it has an operating system, it has a web browser, it can run 2D apps, it can run simple VR experiences, and perhaps even it can run Steam games on a giant virtual screen, flat screen games without needing a PC at all, on low specs in a kind of similar way that Steam Deck does. But obviously this would be at higher resolution, so you need to have a lower graphical fidelity. And then when it comes to VR, right, you want to go and play Half-Life Alyx, you still need a PC, and then that's wirelessly or with a cable if you want, done from a PC, right? That's a possibility. The other possibility is that they go full on standalone, right? This thing is designed to run a ported version of Alyx on the headset itself. I say ported version because the one thing that I could be wrong, but I'm very confident in saying is that this is not magically going to run the current existing PC VR version of Half-Life Alyx without a PC, simply because of physics, right? The idea that you're going to somehow magically put the power of a gaming PC into a headset that's running at a tenth of the wattage is a fantasy. Okay, that is simply a fantasy. The idea that that's possible is become a very wide idea, but look at your gaming PC. Look at the size of your GPU. Look at the fan speed. Check how many watts are being drawn when you're playing Alyx. On PSVR 2, which we'll talk about soon, look at the size of the PlayStation 5. Look at how many hundreds of watts that thing's drawing. You cannot magically take these devices, these giant boxes drawing hundreds of watts, and with these huge cooling fans and cooling architecture, and put them in a headset. That's just not going to happen.
Oh, so Geek Odin, virtual desktop in our audience, saying if you can play PC VR games natively, however, then it will be a hit with the option of connecting to a better PC. All the tricks that Meta has used to make things run performant on the Quest 2 and 3 and 1, right? Valve knows those tricks too. They've been paying attention. They've been using them, a lot of them, on their own platform. Drawing things at half resolution and drawing things at half frame rate and letting the AI fill in those gaps for you gets you some of the way there. And then Half-Life Alyx is a performant system. Like it's a very efficient software too. Like it's they're trying their best at least to get that going. So I get what you're saying, but isn't that the goal all the way along?
I mean, it's the goal one day, but it's not going to happen this year, right? If you try to run um, Half-Life Alyx on even like a Steam Deck or something in VR, it's going to be between 20 and 40 frames per second on the lowest settings at the lowest resolution you can think of, right?
This is the
I think we're having some connection issues. Ian, you're kind of popping in and out. Audience, let us know what you're seeing there in terms of connection. Yeah, I think we've lost Ian for now. I'll have a look at some of the comments. So we have some questions here. People asking, what if the compute is separate in a small box? Sure, if that small box is like the size of a small form factor PC, yeah, it would be roughly the size of like a PlayStation 5, the newer, slightly slimmer one, right? It would be something that would not go on your head, but would be a box. That's possible. But that wouldn't be just for Deckard, right? That would basically just be a small form factor PC. You can go and get a small form factor PC today and do the same thing. That wouldn't be a kind of thing inherent to Deckard. Now, what we have seen rumors about is Valve launching essentially a consoleized PC, something that would be pretty much like a PS5 with a similar kind of AMD APU designed to be plugged into a socket. And that would be fantastic, right? Because then you could have SteamOS on your TV and then have it wirelessly connect to a Deckard headset. Cool. That would work with a Quest headset too, though, right? That wouldn't be something inherent to Deckard. You would be able to, using Steam Link, connect to that on your Quest. It wouldn't be something inherent to Deckard. Having a look at some of the comments here. Guy Godin saying you could play Half-Life Alyx on a subpar mobile x86 processor if you have another SoC doing space warp. People have tried, right? There are people who've done this today with their Steam Link, right? Steam Deck, sorry. You get 20 to 40 frames per second on the lowest settings with very, very low resolution. The other thing is, a handheld PC like Steam Deck has a battery about twice the size of what you can fit in a headset. And I'm talking about either in the front, like Quest 3, or in the back, like Quest Pro and Pico 4. So you're either going to have to do a battery in the front and back, or battery in the back plus an external battery. And then that doesn't even talk about the heat dissipation, right? Think of how hot and how much air is coming out of these things. Look, I would love to be wrong about this. I would love for there to be a magic headset that comes out and you can play Half-Life Alyx without a PC by just putting something on your head. Unfortunately, there's just no indication that the technology for that exists anytime soon.
Do you not think that Valve would consider a battery pack just like Apple?
They could, sure. But even then, you're not going to get to that level of performance, right? And also, it seems a little inelegant for room scale gaming, if that's the focus, to have a tethered battery. But theoretically, yes, you could get enough battery for what I'm describing by having, realistically, you would need a tethered battery and an onboard battery to get. You have to realize these handhelds, I'm sure anyone who knows in the comments who's held a Steam Deck, these are big, big things. These are bigger than the visor of your Quest 3 significantly, these handheld PCs.
So I think I want to recap. So I had the weirdest fail state as I disconnected here, David. The headset froze, the screen froze, so I was locked to a single frame of just the studio here, but I could still hear you and I could still talk to you for a few seconds. So it was quite a wild situation from my end. Yeah, I want the battery pack. I want them to do eye tracking, and I don't care how much it costs. So I'm going to put myself on the record there with Valve. I don't care. Charge what you charge. Put eye tracking in it. Use a battery pack. And give me the glory of Steam VR with hand tracking, with all of my objects around me, all the tools. Let me go grab my golf club. Let me go grab my racing wheel. Let me go grab my throttle for the flight stick. Let me do all those things. That's what Valve should be doing. I think that's where we will end up. If they're not doing that, they missed the boat. So
I think eye tracking is certain. I don't think Valve is going to ship a headset. If let's assume the $1,200 is correct, it's going to have eye tracking. And if the rumor that $1,200 is at a loss is correct, it may even have 4K micro OLED displays. If they're really trying to sell this thing aggressively, this could have incredible specs if they are selling at cost or a loss of $1,200, and that's great, right? And if even if it is just a wireless super index, right? As an index with 4K OLED, pancake displays, eye tracking, inside-out tracking, mixed reality. That's still going to be incredible for VR enthusiasts, right? That's something that, you know, you get the experience that you get today with Steam Link, except instead of on LCD displays without eye tracking, you get all of the advantages of that and a really, really high fidelity experience. That's still cool in itself, but it's not market moving if it's not fully standalone. Now, there is a kind of a third possibility here that they do go for standalone by having like either a separate version of Steam, you know, a section of Steam or something like that, designed for Deckard, optimized for Deckard, where they kind of release a Half-Life Alyx port that is lower fidelity graphics, right? That brings down the graphical fidelity. It's just like when you port a game from PC VR or PSVR to Quest, you bring down the graphical experience. That's going to be quite confusing though, from like a UX perspective on Steam.
Uh,
I wonder how they'll pull that off. They could pull it off, but I wonder how they would pull that off.
If I could hook up a big screen Beyond to my Steam Deck right now, and then look at the big screen, look at the roof, or look at the ceiling while I'm laying in bed, and play my Steam Deck while holding it on my lap, but looking straight up, it would already be a value add for like a lot of people out there to play in bed like that with a low cost HMD. The big screen Beyond is not a low cost HMD, but my point still stands about the use case of just getting me all of my Steam Deck verified games on a bigger screen in complete darkness would be a very useful thing. A couple comments out here.
Yeah, we
Parma.
have a.
Yeah, I love. When you want to read that out from Parma?
Yeah, I was just going to read that $10 donation from Parma saying, I love David's salient speculation. Tuning in late, did I miss any Venn diagrams? So thank you so much for that donation, Parma. There are no Venn diagrams made in Microsoft Paint this week. If you have no idea what that's referring to, go watch last week's episode. We're in the middle.
It was a fever dream.
Yeah, I made a little diagram. I like Onakazi's comment saying people are wish casting insane specs for the supposed price. But to get back to what you're saying, Ian, yeah, I think if you look at those controllers and if you look at what we know here, that could be a huge focus, right? Even if it doesn't happen on board, that still could be a great focus. As you say, with the Steam Deck, it could be the perfect companion. You get this thing, you either connect it with a wire or just use Steam Link, and suddenly you're playing all of your Steam Deck games flat screen on a giant virtual cinema screen in bed with your Deckard headset on beautiful 4K micro OLED displays. You can do that today with Apple Vision Pro, but it's $3,500, right? There's been no standalone headset bar Play for Dream from China, which is around $2,000 that lets you do this. And, you know, it doesn't have Steam Link. So Valve offering this as a first class experience that then lets you use these same controllers out of the box to do this. That itself on itself would be fantastic. But if I had to guess, and again, I could be so wrong about this, this is just us speculating here. I think the VR experience will be primarily focused on streaming from your existing beast of a gaming PC that's pulling 400 watts from the wall socket.
Sure. I think David's probably right there. I still wouldn't put it past him to have a couple, you know, Deckard verified experiences that, you know, right from the outset that really stand out. You know, if it doesn't do Space Pirate Trainer Job Simulator, it will be a miss, right?
Sure. I think can you still hear me?
I can hear you, yeah, but you're fading out like in a weird time. Maybe disconnect and come back, David, because, yeah, he's not over there. So I'll keep talking here while David reconnects. Let's see. There were some really, really interesting things here. I think it was James saying here that they wanted basically AVP, but an uncompressed PC image. That's kind of, they want what they've already got out of the Apple, but they want the PC version of that with an uncompressed image, and ultimately Valve can do that. I want to talk about tracked objects here in a second.
Let me just address what I was saying when I got cut off there. So yeah, when it comes to Beat Saber, Space Pirate Trainer, Job Simulator, all of these graphically simple games, 100% they could probably run this on a Deckard headset on board without a PC, right? But you can do that with a Quest today, right? You can do that with a Quest 2 that you get for $150. You can do that on that kind of headset. I'm talking about Half-Life Alyx, Fallout 4 VR, Skyrim VR, some of the simulators that people play, these higher fidelity experience, Behemoth, Alien Isolation, Metro Awakening, they're PC VR versions. That's where I say that's not going to happen on a standalone headset anytime soon. But I would
See what's
love to be wrong. I'd love for Valve to somehow say we've invented a new kind of cooling or a new kind of chip that's just broken through the physics of what everyone else in the tech industry knows exists today. I'd love to see that happen. I just don't think it is.
So I want to talk about tracked objects here, and I love that these models are up here. So right now, I've been hitting this over on the Gamescast and continue over on the Gamescast as we get into this discussion. But as mentioned elsewhere on the stream, I've got the Striker VR blaster, big giant rifle-sized accessory, and on the top is a rail where you install a Quest 3 controller facing toward the headset so that it gets the best tracking off of this thing. I've also got a handgun model that's very weighty. Puts the controller in the exact same position, facing me with this reverse trigger design situation. What we have a joke here about me talking about the Joy-Cons and how much I love them, right? Like, the reason I love the Joy-Cons is because they show me one aspect of this future where our VR controllers and our gamepads are no longer two sets of accessories that I have to have around me at any given time. Voila, right? Yeah, David's gesturing to it over here. Here is the proper version of what that should be. This is full. I'm seeing the inputs one-to-one compatible with gamepads, and here's my argument here on some of these long brewing things between Meta and Valve. That idea, the Quest headsets are more useful to hobbyists with the controllers turned into tracked objects than used as haptic controllers for games that you're not actually playing. If you're one of these hobbyists who are buying an Ace Virtual Shooting Gun and want to do this, you don't care about ever taking the controller out of the accessory. The controller and the accessory might as well be one for the vast majority of it. Anyone who's installed SteamVR tracking base stations, most likely you tried to put them up once and then forget about them, right? You didn't want to keep moving them from system to system. So you've got this idea here that, like, here's controllers, one set of controllers that might go for everything that's inside of the Steam Deck, everything that's running over on your PC in flat screen, and everything that's running over on your PC in VR, and everything that's running on your headset itself in VR. And here's the thing about it that I want to point out, right? The same fact would still be true for Steam's version of these that I'm describing as true for these tracked objects. I would still, in a lot of instances, want to put each of these controllers into some kind of other accessory and have that accessory as my actual haptic, thing that I'm playing with in VR. So, like, I think about I would be curious to study the history of, like, X input and stuff. Like, this feels like the bigger thing for Valve to rip away from Meta Control as I'm looking at all these tracked objects that use Meta controllers.
Yeah, I think the tracking system of Deckard is just as interesting as anything we discuss around the specs or capabilities, right? We have a question here earlier from Dundeheim who asks, do they make version 3 base stations? And, the expectation here is that they move away from base stations. If you look at these controllers, it's very unlikely that these are using photodiodes. There's no indication that this is lighthouse tracking. It looks like they're going to be using the same kind of infrared LEDs under the plastic that are used in Quest and Pico. And then that opens up the question, is Valve's tracking system more open, right? Do they allow developers of hardware products to make third-party tracked accessories? Do they call this, Steam VR camera tracking or Steam VR CV tracking instead of the traditional one, or they just call it Steam VR Tracking Plus or whatever they brand it? They're going to want to make an ecosystem around this. And I think what's just as interesting is, can other headsets use this, right? Deckard will be running inside-out tracking for the controllers and headset. Can Big Screen make a Big Screen V2 that uses Valve's tracking software? So any startup no longer has to be a computer vision expert house to come out with a great headset. That would be transformative for PC VR, right? So many headsets right now are using Steam VR base station tracking, not in theory because they really think it's what they would want to put in their product, but because the cost of developing computer vision tracking and adding that to their product is something that they're not willing to do, or they would have to add a Qualcomm chip, for example. Well, what if you can just do this on the PC built into Steam VR? All of this is just as promising as the Deckard hardware itself.
So I want to give my story now of the Valve Index launch at some point here. But I want to give my Valve Index story launch, but there is a topic I need to address with you, David. Sometimes researchers and even I think testers use the Steam VR tracking base stations as ground truth in what they are analyzing. So like they reference what they're testing, or like the quality of mobile tracking against the tracking that they get out of the Steam VR tracking base stations. And as I recall, when the Steam VR tracking base stations were first announced, there was some talk about the potential of them for use in robotics. Am I wrong on that? Do you remember the potential for them to be used with robotics?
There were a lot of claims when Steam VR tracking was first announced, and they said that the base stations would eventually be so small and cheap that you could replace your light bulbs with them, and that they would be in cafes and in museums and everyone would be using them everywhere. In reality, the base stations got more expensive, the adoption wasn't widespread, and what's changed in the 10 years since then is the computer vision has gotten leaps and bounds better. And it's to the point where I think there will be some holdouts who really are insistent on, using base stations, but the vast majority of the market will be using this. Valve will be using it. I am confident that at $1,200 they can deliver a tracking experience that is on par or better with lighthouses. And in robotics, have been using inside-out tracking for a long time now, right? That's been one of the drivers of the revolution in robotics we've seen in the past 5 years, is that SLAM has gotten so good, right? Try it on an Apple Vision Pro, as you know. Have you ever put on your Apple Vision Pro, and other than the quirks of, maybe you have a TV on and it misreads that, that's something that's fixable, as we see in Quest headsets. Do you ever say to yourself, wow, this tracking isn't good enough? I would argue the Apple Vision Pro has better fixed off headset positional tracking than any headset, including any Lighthouse headset. So it's demonstrable that we don't need base stations anymore. And I'm sure this is going to anger a lot of enthusiasts, but it is the reality. And if you look at that Valve job listing I was referencing earlier, they talk about computer vision, head tracking, hand tracking, controller tracking, and all of that.
What is it that John Carmack said? It does not look good for doing inside-out positional tracking without consuming a whole lot of power. I know that's been that's been the focus of their research for the past decade, right? Like to get that power consumption down.
And they did it in Oculus Quest, right? They did it in Oculus Quest in 2019.
Yeah.
6 years ago.
But like there's some things here, right? Like what we're finding out is it's not good enough, right? Like you still need more computer vision. You need it sampling all the time for people and pets and objects that have suddenly gotten into your space. Like it seems like it keeps sucking more power because you need to do more things with it.
Yeah, but the chipsets get more powerful every year, right? We talk about how Quest 3's GPU is more than twice as powerful as Quest 2's. But we've also talked about that its NPU, the neural processing unit that runs a lot of these computer vision tasks, got 8 times more powerful. So you're seeing like an 8x jump in generations. And there's no reason, based on Qualcomm's progress, to doubt that will happen again with Quest 4. So it's going to get a bunch more, right? So Quest 3 uses that, to do the real-time environment mapping and the depth API and better tracking. And doing the fact that Quest 3 is always running hand tracking and controller tracking at the same time. So it can fuse those together. So even when your controller is occluded, if your hand isn't, it'll rely on that for half a second or so, right? You get that already happening. Then Quest 4, what can they add with an extra 8x? Look at what Apple already does with theirs, right? They have with their M2 chip, people detection and hand segmentation. What happens in a year's time when we get an M5 Vision Pro that might have 20 or 30 times the NPU power? That's already happening.
Yeah. I guess I was thinking of you. I wanted you to estimate the amount of the processor that was used to do all of those tasks, and just trying to think of the parallelizing that Valve can do between the PC and the headset, splitting some tasks apart for you. The way that we remember there were rumors that Mac had considered, that Apple had considered for its headset system.
Well, that was just going to be using the Mac to render, right? When it comes to computer vision tasks, the tracking, you always want to do that on the headset for latency reasons, right? No matter what no matter what Deckard is, it's going to run the computer vision on the headset itself. Even PlayStation VR2 does that. It doesn't use the PlayStation 5. People, a lot of people don't know this, but PlayStation VR2 has a chipset. It's not from Qualcomm. It's from MediaTek, who's kind of the other company you can get a chipset from if you're building like an Android phone or something. And it does a lot of its computer vision tasks on board on that MediaTek chipset. And it's just critical for latency. Also for bandwidth. Rift S didn't. It tried to do a lot of this on your PC, and there were always USB issues of all kinds. We saw even, with Windows MR headsets, there'd be issues with that sometimes. And that was limiting in many ways how much cameras they could have and what resolution. Well, do that on board and you can go way beyond that and not worry about the PC. The last thing you want is there's a momentary cut in the wireless or wired connection to the PC and your headset tracking breaks. You don't want that.
So this is discussion. We're going to be going over 200 people here as we talk at length about the Valve news here. And I think we've got one more subject after that, but it's still a big subject here for us to discuss here.
PlayStation VR2 after this, yeah.
Yeah, we've got more to discuss here, I think. A lot still going in the comments here. So I want to give my Valve Index story here of 2019 getting invited to Valve to see the Index. What's amazing about the story, like even today, a lot of people who bought a Quest over the last few years don't remember or know that Valve powered the HTC Vive in 2016. Valve was very happy to let HTC do a lot of the marketing there, take a lot of that cost, and promote this product and just be the background software partner. Critically, HTC Vive, this thing that we started our show discussing, this Viverse, the latest iteration of that, it was allowed to launch as two versions of like your home space on the headset. So Valve went through and followed through on this promise of, if you wanted to replace the Steam Home with the Vive Home, you could. And you could actually go over to the Vive store and buy things from them if you wanted, right? They didn't extend that same sort of capability to Oculus, and many people were destroyed in the comments sections of Reddit over the last decade as a result of this overall thing. So that's 2016. A couple years past, 2019 comes, and we get an invite from Valve to go check out their latest work, right? I go out to their offices and can't find the right floor where they're in. I finally found the right floor where they're at, and got to go check out the Index, and they had a room with, I think it was No Man's Sky set up, as well as a big flat screen game playing on a big giant home theater. I talked to one of their people who said, why I got into VR was because I saw this future of telecommunications, right? Like this end goal. I got introduced to the Frunk, this idea that they put this big open space on the front of the headset where anyone could plug in any USB device they want and do whatever they want with that USB device, passing along the power of their PC that's over in the corner over there, bringing that USB all the way to your headset and giving you that option. Point out the Big Screen Beyond follows that model a little bit. They've got the USB out on it. And then the Apple Vision Pro, of course, uses that space on its headset for the EyeSight display. So it found a use for that space that Valve offered us to consider back in 2019. Then I go to Meta's offices. And the thing about this is I can't remember the exact turn of events, but I get an email before I go to Meta's event that Valve has changed the embargo timing on their announcement of the Index to just a few hours difference or something like what it was. But ultimately, the timing of the change from them was to put it 1/2 hour before Mark Zuckerberg was to take the stage at the announcement of the Rift S and the Quest 1. So I go to this physical event in California where Mark Zuckerberg is getting ready to go on stage, and I've got two embargoes in my hat, so to speak. We've got the embargo of knowing what Meta is about to announce up on stage there with a Rift S and a Quest and the prices of each. And I also know that someone has indicated to Valve the exact timing of this event to happen with Meta, with Facebook at the time. And right before Zuckerberg goes on stage, the Valve Index gets announced, with people going crazy all over chat over the fact that Valve has delivered a new VR headset after all this time, taking the wind right out of the sails of the Rift S. Historically, David, what happened with the Rift S and the Index over Steam VR? I can't remember. What's its story even right now, today? Rift S versus David went and immediately started. He's got the chart, right? I didn't even think of it. He's like, I've got the chart. He didn't even have to tell me. He's like, I've got the chart. We're gonna do it. Yeah. What are the numbers? I'm curious how that landed over the span of time.
Yeah, so for I think 1 or 2 years, the Rift S outsold Index by about 2 to 1. So for every Index sold, there were two Rift S. But then what we saw very quickly with the release of Quest 2 and Quest 3 was that the Rift S had a lot less staying power than the Valve Index. And whereas people clung on to their Index and kept it for years, and as you can see, still 13% of Steam VR are using that. Only around 6% are still using the Rift S. So they upgraded many of them to Quest 2, many of them then to Quest 3 and 3S, whereas Index stuck at a roughly the same level of, roughly 18 or so percent for years. And only recently, since the release of Quest 3, have we seen Index start to decline on Steam VR. So that is kind of, we are past the point where if Valve wants to not continue to keep reducing its percentage share on Steam, it does need to release a new headset, right? We can bring up the chart here that kind of shows you where Valve Index is today, and you can see that the vast majority of Steam is either on a Quest 2, Quest 3, Quest Pro or 1, or a Rift headset. And one thing I wanted to note, by the way, is that you bring up that point of Valve announcing the Index just alongside Rift S. Every single Meta event since, people have expected that. They expected for Quest 3, right? Everyone was saying, right, Valve's going to announce now, and for Quest 3S, I remember, this was a couple of months ago, so many people were saying, right, this is Deckard's going to be announced, and it didn't happen. And the interesting thing is, right, that if Valve does launch this later this year, this is going to be one of the only years that, as far as we know, Meta is not going to launch a new Quest headset. So they won't be doing that this time.
Well, and they're depending on their partners. So can we go back to, can you bring up the other one again? Because sure. I think it's really fantastic. Because David, you are so good at pointing out the winning that Meta has been doing in focusing on standalone, right? They've been eating up so much of this chart, this overall thing in overall share. But I'm seeing in our comments people like Mobbeast, who I think just became a member of our channel today. So thank you for that support. And they said that they got into VR at the Rift S. And I know a lot in our audience either got into VR, or it was even their second or third headset back when the Index came out. And it's amazing for us to, there's two different games being played here, right? With this chart that we see being played. There's the Meta doing the standalone push that we see Oculus Quest 2, wherever it is, Quest, right at the top, Quest 3S, all of them, Quest 3. We see the standalone eating this up, but that's not the game Valve is playing. What they're playing was this game, right? The Valve Index versus the Rift S. And ultimately, they're still selling the same thing for $1,000 that they did back in 2019. And it's, if you want high-end VR, it's very easy for, over this span of time, people to go, hey, just go get, it's going to cost you, but this is your route. And 13% versus 5%, right? Like, it's unfair to compare all the others, all the standalones, to the story that played out over a larger span of time here.
So there's one way in which I disagree. You said that Valve is playing. I think that's what they were playing for the first year or two of Index, but then something dramatically changed, and that's that Meta introduced official support for PC VR on Quest, and the tools like Virtual Desktop got really, really good. And so what we saw happen after the release of Quest 2 was that people buying Meta headsets were bringing a surge of customers to Steam VR because instead of being just standalone, it's not like a Nintendo Switch where you can only play games from the Nintendo Store cartridges for that thing. Like these headsets became not just standalone headsets, they became wireless PC VR headsets that people could buy for a couple of $100s. And then we saw about a year ago, just over a year ago, one of the most significant things to ever happen in this industry was Valve releases the official Steam Link for free on Quest. So I think we're in a completely different world than we were back at the launch of the Index. And I think that's perhaps why it isn't such a big deal that if Deckard is $1,200, that it is too expensive for most people. Because let's be real, for the majority of people, they will not spend four figures. You can shake your head all you want. The majority of people, $1,200, it might not exist. It might as well not exist. For the majority of people,
So,
the only
as well as homes might as well not exist. Cars might
Sure,
not as well exist.
homes and
Phones might
cars.
not as well exist.
Homes and cars are the only thing that people will pay that money for. Okay, for the majority of people, and a TV once every 10 years. Like that's the reality. Let's be honest here. We're in a tech enthusiast bubble where we think that people are going to spend that amount of money for other things. Then you get some people who will spend for specifically Apple a couple of $1,000 or $1,200 or so for a MacBook, right? Apple is the only company that sells significant volumes at that price. The vast majority of Windows laptops are sold at $300, $500, $700. Televisions even today, most people are able to get a 4K mini LED TV for $400 at Best Buy, right? Like we are not in a world where most people spend that. There is an exception, of course, and that's the smartphone. But there's two factors here. One, those are paid monthly for the majority of people. And two, that is a portable Omni tool that offers a dozen different functions and sits in your pocket available for almost all day use, right? So,
and the reason it does is because it has a cellular internet connection. That's not
yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons, but it's also that it fits in your pocket, and it's a camera, a GPS navigator, a communicator, a calculator, an alarm clock. It's everything that you used to have a portable device for in one device and more. A smartphone provides utility that nothing else can. But just to get back to that, I'm saying that the reason that the majority of people don't care about $1,200. That's just a fact. But the reason that doesn't matter is because you can still go out and buy a Quest 3S for $300, and with one click for free, well, 2 or 3 clicks to be precise, connect to Steam VR wirelessly. So Valve doesn't need to come out with a $500 headset because Meta already did, and Meta doesn't run its own PC store anymore, right? When Rift S was coming out, there were still Rift exclusives. They were still coming out with titles, right? We saw Lone Echo 2 in 2021 was the swan song for that. And from then, Meta said, we're not going to fund any more AAA titles on PC. We're done with that. We have this really, really successful standalone platform that we're going to put all our focus into. And then, Asgard's Wrath 2, Assassin's Creed, Batman, all of these Meta-funded games, they're only on standalone, right? So Valve is actually in an ideal position where nobody is competing with Steam for VR anymore. That's what if you go back to the release of HTC Vive, that's what they cared about. They didn't care about the Rift. They cared about the Oculus store. If Oculus had just been selling a hardware piece with no store, Valve probably wouldn't have bothered with the Vive. They cared because they wanted you to connect instantaneously to Steam and for Steam to be the central area for where you purchase things. And once Meta withdrew from that market in 2021, Valve was able to sit back and go, every single headset that Meta sells to a person who also owns a gaming PC is giving us a new VR customer.
I own both a Switch and I own both a Steam Deck. And when I bought the Steam Deck, when I started introducing it to my life, I started spending less money on the Switch. And maybe I'm off on the $1,000, but here's the thing that I think a lot of us are missing. Yeah, $500 is the cap for an entertainment device. Fair, all right? An Xbox One, a PlayStation 4, that's the right price. But we're not talking about that. We're not talking about what a Steam Deck is to the people out there who buy the Steam Deck, right? Like, it is a PC. It is my technology for me to mess with as I please. And that's the same as a home. That's the same as a car. Like that's a plaything, a toy, like a tool that is more malleable, useful, goes in places, and is going to last longer than these lower end things. And when yes, the budget is, yes, the $1,000 for the Index was cruddy, and yes, that like limited its use cases. I've got 2 base stations in this office that I lugged across the United States, just because I didn't want to ever lose Steam VR tracking. I did this thing. I put one of my lighthouses on Siri, so I could say, "Hey Siri, turn off the lighthouses," and they would turn off, right? And it dawned on me, I never want that, right? Like, after I had done all that, it's like, wait, why would I ever want the base station to be off? I need those tracking base stations everywhere. And what it's done is it's trained me to, like, this is my VR space. And in fact, it trains other people in the house to, like, well, let's not actually walk into that space while this person is using it. It's a very interesting thing. That's a low cost way of allowing VR into my home, without installing 7 cameras everywhere, which was Meta's approach, right? I had to
Well, it was
have
2 or 3, depending on what you wanted.
I
Right?
could have installed 7 if I had enough USB ports, couldn't I?
Yeah, right. But that wasn't Meta's approach after 2019, right? They sold the Rift S with
My,
tracking.
I'm losing the plot. I often lose Onakazi in the plot, and I lose David in the plot. That's fine. People spend more money on their homes and their personal computers than they do on their game consoles. And that is what Valve
Not most
makes
people.
for us.
Gaming PC users do, but most people's laptops, like if you look globally, right, or even if you look in developed countries, the highest selling laptops are $300, $500, $700 Windows laptops. And then you have a certain portion of wealthy people who buy MacBooks. A lot of those MacBooks are sold at $1,000 when the last generation model comes down in price on retailers, and then you have a small selection of creatives who are spending $2,000, $3,000 on these MacBooks. But even then, Apple is like a luxury brand that has been able to kind of.
And what are the computing tasks people are doing on these $200 and $300 devices you always bring up? We always want to pretend that people are doing all of the computing tasks in the Chrome web browser. And sure, I can go to photop.com and I've got Photoshop.
This isn't Chrome OS; it's Windows. It's running Windows 11, right?
I give me, like, what people are doing with more powerful PCs is changing. That's granted, right? And we don't know, like, what is the use case for a $2,000 PC that is really going to move things. Man, how many times do I have to argue with you and everyone else in this audience that if I can bring my full body into VR by spending an extra $400, there's a market of people who are going to do it.
Of
Like,
course,
there's people who want to bring their whole body in, and it's worth the extra expense to do it.
There is a market, but it's tens of thousands or at most hundreds of thousands, not millions. That's all I'm arguing. Of course, to be clear, if you're a VR enthusiast, $1,200 is great, right? If you really care about this and this is your hobby, a Valve headset, if it's high quality, if it has eye tracking and 4K micro OLED and all of these great things that Valve might be able to put into the headset, that's great for you. But for most people, were outraged by the PS5 Pro being $700, right? Like, that's the world that most people live in. $1,200 to them, it doesn't exist, right? But again, that's only for
lose
the mass
reviews.
market.
You guys are so wrong. Everyone is so wrong. The market is not small for full body tracking. I'm sorry. The market is small for the cost it takes to get full body tracking. Like, let's not.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Let's stop mincing. Let's stop talking about wrongness.
But
Dancing
we're talking about
is not an
product.
activity that a minority of humans enjoy. It's an activity that a majority of humans enjoy. Except dance halls aren't easy to get to, right?
Sure. No, I agree with you that full body tracking is great and useful. I've agreed with you that many, many times. I don't even know we don't know if Deckard's going to provide that at $1,200, right? Are they going to do inside out body tracking like Meta does for the upper body? Are they going to have kind of body tracking cameras? Are they going to have HTC Vive Ultimate Tracker style trackers? We don't know. But like, this isn't hypothetical, it exists today, right? You can go out and buy Vive Ultimate trackers and strap them to your body in VR chat. Or if you have base stations, you can go and get the regular Vive trackers, right? It's not hypothetical, it exists today. And we know that most people that play VR chat, even the people who play VR chat in VR, most of them don't spend a couple of $100 needed for full body tracking.
I don't know. There's a very big rave community out there, and shout out to the ravers out there. Enjoy your raving out there from your bedrooms with your full body tracking, dancing to the oons oons music in the dark. Right? Okay, good for you. Keep up with keep living the dream. You're doing it at home. You're not putting any gas in the air. You're not changing the environment. You're you're not endangering other people by going on the streets while drunk or intoxicated. You're partying at home, and it is a big scene out there. And like I don't believe those are enthusiasts. Those are early adopters. What's coming down is the price, and the question is who's going to bring it down in the right way, right? Like who's going to bring down the price in the lowest cost way, the quickest of getting your full body in there. All right, I'm happy with
Eco,
this
I
fight.
guess.
This was a good fight, David.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, yeah, I don't think we're disagreeing on the value of this. It's just about, where the kind of price comes to be worth it for most people. But we'll keep a close eye on Steam VR data miners, Valve leakers, all of these people and sources, as well as Valve itself, for any hints of what might be coming this year, because we really still don't actually know what is going to be Deckard, right? All we know is we know what the controllers will look like. We think we have a leak of suggesting the price. We have a lot of people saying playing Steam games on a virtual screen is going to be a core feature. Beyond that, it's all speculation. And thank you all for being here for that speculation. But we have one more topic to discuss, and that
Yeah,
topic,
we've got our last subject
yeah,
here, and David's going to pull up some assets here, and we've got a very active discussion. So hello to Dunadim, F Meister, Mindweaver. Thank you for always calling out to hit that like button. Always appreciate you out there. So yeah, do hit that like button and get us over get us a few more people in here as we discuss this last big shift to the PC, PSVR2 market. This is a big one. And yeah, thank you for that lively discussion there, David. We are coming up on 1 p.m. Is that right? What am I looking at here on the timing? I'm confused, but 11 p.m. Or sorry, 11 a.m. Pacific time.
yeah, that's
And I
PT at
believe
the top of your
I
tablet
know,
there.
right? I'm looking at the P and trying to speak PM or Pacific time, right? Okay, all right. So yeah, we've got the top of the hour coming up here. There should be a new article up on UploadVR.com at the top of the hour, and a new video over there as we end this chat. If Don Hopper resuscitates his PC, hopefully we can get him into Gorn, but we're probably not going to do that. Let's
Yeah.
talk about this last subject here, David.
Yeah, let's talk about PlayStation VR2. I think some people came to this chat to talk about it. We're finally on it. So Sony has announced officially that they are cutting the regular price of PlayStation VR2 from $550 to $400. And that is weirdly for both the regular package and for the one with Horizon Call of the Mountain. So it's no more expensive to buy the bundle that includes Horizon than it is to buy it on its own. That's strange. It suggests to me that they're probably going to phase out the regular package and just say that every PSVR 2 comes with Horizon Call of the Mountain. So this is not the lowest price we've ever seen it go, but it is the regular price. This isn't a sale. This is from March, which is a couple of days from now, the new price. We have, of course, seen it at $350 for 1 week in the summer and for 6 weeks at the holidays, but that was a discount, for summer and for the winter holidays. This is the new price. So I think this makes it a lot more appealing for a PlayStation 5 owner because this is now the same price as the console, not more expensive. It also makes it a great budget PC VR headset. I think specifically for simulators, right? If you're doing a racing sim, a flight sim, Elite Dangerous, and you want a great headset for sitting on your rig that you've set up, and it's you're sitting down, you just want something that plugs into DisplayPort, pretty much just works, doesn't have compression. It could be a great option for you on PC. But I think for PS5 owners, this is going to shift a lot of units. Any thoughts?
Well, what do you think if this is the new price? If you sold the controller separate, what do you think they would go for at this new price?
Oh, that's a good question. I think you'd be talking either 100, 120, or 150, and for context for the audience, we do expect, based on leaks, that Sony will start selling these separately for use with Apple Vision Pro sometime this year.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to think about. So put that in context of our last discussion where we talked about the alignment between controllers and VR, like gamepads and VR controllers, this issue that we've got. And then we just looked at the Valve controllers that models that had been leaked, and you got the two buttons on the back there, the two triggers, L1 and L2. They could be, or R1 and R2 if you really wanted them to be. And then here you've got this slow brewing system over the next couple months, building to Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference at the beginning of summer. I have made the pitch. I'm not going to be doing a lot of traveling this year, so I want David to go to any demos we get invited to, with any exception. Like, we'll debate any exceptions to that, but I really want David to see as much as he can of VR hardware this year, because I think it's going to be a critical year for VR hardware, and it's going to be critical to have his eyeballs in that hardware as early as humanly possible. We aren't in control of that, right? It's up to the companies to invite us to those things to see this stuff early, but I trust him, and I trust him to look at these things throughout the course of the year. And this one, right? Like, I want that I want to go into an Apple store and just buy those for 150, add them to my Apple Vision Pro, and I'm good. And it's really, really cool to think about these things like branching off, right? What does this sell for if it sells with hand tracking only without the controllers?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do that, right? I don't think they're going to sell that. It's just so essential. We've one game that runs on PS5 VR with hand tracking, Waltz of the
What if
Wizard,
the
and
Valve
everything.
controllers were compatible with this?
Why would they, right? Every single game on PlayStation VR2 is designed around these controllers. I think there's a lot of utility to that consoleized experience, and they're right. They already make it, right? They already sell the SKU. There's no need to start messing with that, I don't think. But I have a comment here from Apu saying, they got the PlayStation VR2 at launch and it's been underwhelming. Hopefully, with the price drop, we will see Sony bring more of their IPs to the space. I want more PSVR ports and PS5 hybrids. I think that's a great point, right? That it's not just the price that's been holding this back. Sony's content commitment has been really lacking, right? There were great AAA titles at the start: Horizon Call of the Mountain, Gran Turismo 7, Resident Evil 8. And since then, we've seen nothing really from Sony, right? Maybe they funded Resident Evil 4, but that was already on a Quest and a lower fidelity version. We haven't seen in the 2 years, right? This is coming 5 days after the 2-year anniversary of PlayStation VR2. And we haven't seen a single AAA title announced since then. Maybe you could argue that Firewall was, but that was so much of a flop that the studio had to shut down, as we reported at the time. One thing that Sony could really do, a low-hanging fruit that I've repeatedly said, is introduce a compatibility mode for PlayStation VR1 titles that never got ported over. So that would bring the likes of Skyrim VR, it would bring the likes of Star Wars Squadrons, Astrobot, Blood and Truth. The reality is that right now, there are some incredible PSVR1 titles, and it is a crying shame that you cannot play it on this, right? You can talk about, like, yeah, they use different controllers, so what? We do that on PC VR all the time. If Sony's engineers really, really wanted to do it, they could figure out a compatibility mode here. In the absolute worst case scenario, if you needed to get PS Move controllers, they could get PS Move controllers tracked by this headset. There's nothing stopping this headset from tracking PS Move controllers if you really wanted to say, right, you need to have the same controllers the game was built for. I think a lot of PS5 owners would happily go and get those to do this. So, as what we do hope happens is that at this new price, more and more people buy the headset, and then it gets to the point where third-party studios can justify building content around this. What we should say, though, is that multi-platform titles have been launching recently that are essentially AAA, right? There's been Metro Awakening, there has been Alien Rogue Incursion, there has been Skydance's Behemoth, and all of these titles look a lot better on PSVR2 than they do on Quest. But you'd still like to see Sony bring one of their IPs. It's just crazy that, like, the only Sony IPs we've seen brought into this were both at launch, Horizon and Gran Turismo, and nothing in the 2 years since, at least nothing AAA.
Looks like Don Hopper has resuscitated his PC right at the end of this conversation. So over the 2 hours plus that David Heaney and I have been fighting back and forth about the future of Valve and Sony, we have he's gotten the PC back alive in front of him. So hopefully he can beat the crap out of some guys in Gorn later this afternoon, or Gorn 2, I should say. Make sure to go watch that video that should have just premiered with, I'll let Don call it out in the comments just to make sure that the embargo has lifted on that one. But that was a really cool conversation to have here in our studio, talking about things that Arlen cares about deeply. Casey Chiefs Productions, see you in the comments out there. Just want to point out, yeah, the way people look dumb inside headsets is still out there. Sony is a company known for making great hardware, right? Like they do have a reputation for it. The question that I think David, myself, Don Hopper out there, Henry Stockdale, we're all kind of wondering, what vertical does Sony focus on for their next headset? And do they, all we've seen as this weird creative focused headset, but it didn't feel like it worked. Like maybe the software wasn't complete yet. Maybe there needs to be a lot more progress in the software for us to see what they're putting together there. We'll have that assessment over time. But like, I want a Blu-ray machine. I want the best Blu-ray. I want Ultra HD 3D movies on my headset. And like, here's a thing that can technically do it at a couple $100 without controllers.
Well, but it can't, because it's 2K per eye, right? You don't have enough pixels in this thing to do a 4K movie, right? And the pixels that are in it, it's pentile subpixel arrangement, which they have to blur out with these lenses. So you get this soft look. This is not the ideal headset for movies, right? You can do that today. I'm pretty sure you can play Blu-rays on this thing, and you can play your traditional PS5 games on a virtual screen, but this doesn't have the lenses or displays that are really optimized for that. The only headsets we've seen that are great for that cost thousands of dollars, as we've been discussing, using 4K micro OLED and these expensive pancake lenses. That's something I would love to see them focus on in a PlayStation VR3 for PS6. Once these high resolution OLED micro displays are available for that. But I don't think that that's something for this headset. I want to bring up a comment here from Subcog saying, Sony ran a very successful experimental price during the holiday season. Why wouldn't they go at that same price, right? You're bringing up, this is cut to 400, but they were selling it at 350 on sale. So why not? I suspect that 350 was pretty much probably cost price. Probably they were not making a profit at 350. And so 400 is probably giving them a very narrow margin, perhaps, plus or minus $50 either way. But that's why, and I ran an editorial on PlayStation VR 2's anniversary a few days ago, before we knew that this price cut was going to be a thing, arguing that there's a different headset Sony should sell that isn't some exotic high-end standalone, but I think they should sell a PlayStation VR 2S. Right? So right now, today in the Meta ecosystem, you have Quest 3 and you have Quest 3S. And Quest 3S existing just means that more people can buy in and developers have more people to sell to. It doesn't take away anything from a Quest 3 owner. So I bring up the idea that Sony should basically sell a cheaper version of this thing that has LCD displays, or even a single LCD display, and maybe take out the headset rumble instead of OLED. And immediately the reaction from some people is, but I love OLED. I think OLED's great. Well, great. This wouldn't take that away from you. They would still sell PSVR 2, just like Meta still sells Quest 3. But for people who don't want to spend even $400 on a headset for their PS5, why not give them a $200 or $250 headset? A PSVR 2S. It only gives you an advantage because it means more people, more of the 75 million PlayStation 5 owners can go and buy this thing. And then if Sony came out with a PSVR 2S, it's literally the same thing, just swap out the panels for LCD, and they can chop 100 or 150 off. And millions of PS5 owners who weren't going to buy it otherwise pick this thing up at 200, 250, whatever it is on a sale. That's only going to be good because developers are going to see that and go, wow, there's a market here. I'm going to go build a great game for these people. And then you get to play that on your fancy OLED PSVR 2. So it only would advantage you. So that was the argument I made in an editorial. And I still think Sony should do it. I still think 400 is great, right? 400 is great, but it's not 250, And for a lot of people, we're talking about that price thing again. I'm talking about the difference between kind of, wealthy tech enthusiasts and regular people. For a lot of people, the PlayStation 5 is a big purchase, right? It's a meme that like you save up for your PS5 or, oh, I did it for the PS5, and it's a $400 purchase. So for a lot of people, the idea that they're going to get a PS5 and then go and spend 400 again on a headset is still out of their reach. And that's what I think Sony should just make a cheaper version as well and sell alongside, just like Meta does with Quest 3S. No different.
Yeah, very interesting take there. And I think it's probably time to end our stream. I want to leave it with a comment though, as I'm watching the discussion here about looking weird in VR. You go into an Apple Vision Pro on an airplane flight right now today, and you travel to the moon and you enjoy a movie for 2.5 hours. And when someone comes over to you and asks you if you'd like a drink on this flight that you paid for, they pop into your existence on the moon. You look at them, address them as a human to a human, and then you get your drink after a few minutes, and you go back to watching the next movie on your show. That seems polite. That seems like it seems like it is on the person who is viewing the person in the headset to be a better person than judging the person who is in the VR headset, right? Like I think it's on you as the judger, the person who's judging someone who's in a headset, that their life is like I understand concern that don't you wish that like you could do something outside of the headset? Like there's that kind of like pity that comes from someone. It's like, no, I'm choosing to go to the moon because it lets me focus, and I can't focus with all these other windows coming at me. So, I'm sorry for you having to deal with all of the distractions out in the real world. I'm going to the moon where no one is going to bother me, right? Like I don't have to deal with an ad pop up every 5 minutes. And the thing about AR out in the physical world, the flip of this, the see-through cameras, it's not the same thing. Every one of those cameras out in public is gathering information, and it is looking at me. Like I'm looking at the moon, right? But out in the physical world, it's not the same thing. The technology that I'm bringing with me is looking at everybody else. It's having a little subtle interaction with the public, and like the interaction is like, why you put cameras on me? That's not the same thing as me privately in my office going, I just want to be on the moon. And it just so happens I need 6 cameras to help me go to the moon. Right. And like you walked into the view of my cameras, that's on you. I don't feel bad that you walked into the view of my cameras as I'm sitting here doing this thing. It's not the same thing as walking out in the physical world with a pair of cameras, with a bunch of people in public that, don't know that you're capturing them.
Yeah, I mean, you say capturing, but you're not, right? Unless you're specifically recording, which makes the headset pulse on the front, you're not. Like we have to distinguish between tracking, where a computer vision system is taking in each frame, processing it, and then discarding it, right? It wouldn't make sense to save it. You would just use up all your storage in a couple of hours or minutes or whatever, right? Versus recording, and those are different things. I don't think the cameras are what's preventing the social acceptability of wearing headsets in public, especially if you talk about on a train, in a cafe, on a plane. I've worn my Vision Pro in these situations. People didn't really care. I think the problem for low-cost headsets is aesthetics. It's something we don't talk about much, but Quest 3 and Quest 3S are just ugly, right? They don't look good. It's fine if you're on your own in your house, who cares? But if you want to go wear this thing in a cafe, on a plane, on a train, you kind of think I look like a weird triclops with the Quest 3, and I was like, it's so bulging and big with the Quest 3S. If you had a sleek visor that, looked like the Immersive visor renders before they changed the product to be a real product, or if you had something that was just like Vision Pro but a lot lower cost, I think you would see more and more people do this. A funny story about this: I was wearing my Vision Pro on a plane recently, and the flight attendant didn't seem to be aware that I even could see the real world. I was in pass-through mode because I was eating food and stuff at the same time. And so they come up and they kind of wave their hand in front of my face, and they're laughing, like they're not doing it in like a mean way. They're just finding it funny. Like they didn't even think I could see it. And then I turn around and look at them, and they can see the virtual eyes, and they kind of have this moment of shock of, oh my god, you can see me. And then they asked to try it out, and it wasn't. They didn't care. It wasn't a malicious interaction. They just found it curious and funny and wanted to try it. So I've never had anyone turn around and be like, that's, take that off, or nobody really cares. Some people look and be, oh, cool. Is that Apple headset? Yeah. Oh, cool. And then they continue on about their day.
Well, I think, the headsets seem to introduce some very uncomfortable class issues, sort of the direction of the world issues, right? We'll be on it, right? But people choose to go into headsets by and large, and when people are forced into headsets, we will be covering that too, and we think that will happen. I think that will happen eventually, if it hasn't already happened in some places. I mean, it is, right? Like it's going to be. These headsets are so useful, and we're not talking about game consoles anymore, right? So I see someone in our chat asking, when are we going to talk about Orion Drift? Please tune in to us on Tuesday. So Orion Drift just launched a beta. This is a very brilliant, interesting idea where you've got other regions of a space station you can go and visit. Very, very interesting idea on how they can support hundreds of people and make virtual reality not feel quite so sparse. Give you other things that you can kind of always see to do, right? We're here on Earth, right? We've got gravity to contend with. There's an entire curve of the Earth that we can't see cool objects around. Oh, France is over there. You can't see it from here. But on Orion Drift, you can, right? Like you can position those things at just the right spots. All right. Anything else you want to close off on here, David?
Well, I just want to give the context to the viewers and listeners who aren't familiar with our shows or what you mean by tune in on Tuesday. So this is VR Download, which we do on Thursdays. This is our hardware, industry trends, technology show. Then at UploadVR, we have a separate show we do on Tuesdays called the VR Games Cast. So if you're looking for a discussion of Orion Drift, tune in on Tuesdays, where you'll find Ian as well as Don Hopper discussing that. There's one comment I want to bring up here, and sorry to roast you, Apu, but the commenters already are. The interesting part of your comment is that you're saying, in addition to this idea of a PSVR 2S that goes lower, you want a PSVR 2 Pro. And I think that's an interesting idea in itself. That part, I'm not going to roast you on. You suggest, one of the things you suggest is it should be wireless. And I think, sure, yeah, I think other than the price, the second thing that turns people off of PSVR 2 is the cable. If you're a VR enthusiast, that might not resonate with you. But by definition, think about it. If you're someone who has bought a headset to use the cable, with a cable, you're someone who doesn't care about the cable. But there are millions of people who waited in the era before wireless headsets were available for them to be wireless. I know because I've done hundreds of demos in my time. And before Quest, even amongst gaming PC and PlayStation owners, the biggest thing of like the response of, would you want to buy one of these was, I don't want it with the wire. When's it going to be wireless? And then in years later, once I demoed the wireless Quest to people, dozens of people bought it because they were like, okay, this is wireless now and it's a couple $100. I'm going to buy this. And I'm even talking about PlayStation and or PC owners. The problem I am going to roast you on, Apu, is you say it should be 4K per eye, color pass through, and launch at $550. And we have to just point this out because you're not going to get a 4K per eye headset anytime soon at $550. The 4K panels, these 4K micro OLED displays, a pair alone costs about that, right? So then you have to build the entire rest of the headset around it. And then, as well, obviously make a profit in the majority of cases for companies. So sorry to roast you there, but you just have to be aware that what you're describing would be a $1,500 or $2,000 product, not a maybe $1,200 if they wanted to sell at cost, going back to that Valve Index question.
Yeah. very good point. And it's one of the things that I've wondered about overall, David, is just how much of the next 5 years of the VR market is just seeing VR headsets, every other VR headset get up to the resolution of the Apple Vision Pro to get to this minimum. I saw you spend a fair portion of this show discussing like maybe they should go to LCD. You did it in your editorial. But I'm gonna go on the flip side and understand, like, even though you're roasting that person, right? Maybe OLED is the minimum. Maybe OLED has always been the minimum. Maybe we really need to have a true black background for reality when we're going into VR. Maybe it's necessary. And so, like, maybe Sony needs to have the displays that are inside the Apple Vision Pro, and it's not worth doing another headset unless they go and get, they use those headsets too after Apple did.
You can make that argument. I'm just saying you can't do it for $550.
Yeah.
That's the only part I'm roasting. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying you can't do, like, you wouldn't even cover the displays themselves for that price. There are sometimes you have this unrealistic idea in the VR community that people want to have this headset with all of these magic specs and eye tracking, face tracking, and super duper, super high end 180-degree lenses. And then you're like, and then I'd pay $500 for it. And that's where, you get into that's just not reality, right? It's like saying I want a Lamborghini for $20,000. It's just not how the world works. I think we're ready to close out here unless there's anything else you want to bring up, Ian.
Nope. Yeah, that's it. I will, if there happens to be any UploadVR.com site members tuning in to us today, I have the other benefit that I promised over on Monday to meet you on. So also, if you're not a member yet, go become a member at UploadVR.com right now. So I've got an article that I published on Monday that just, we had a member first stream. So that was Don Carson. Go check that video out now. It's public. That's a full conversation with Don Carson, the senior art director at Walkabout Mini Golf, going into their philosophy of design. A very enlightening conversation there where you can learn about how they add so much magic to those worlds. So I put that out on Monday for our members, our site members first. And in that post, I said I would go into Walkabout Mini Golf right after the stream for like a round of golf with any members out there who wanted to join us. So I'm going to go into that article. You can go onto uploadvr.com, just scroll down to the article, UploadVR member first stream. If you're a member, it should unlock and go inside of it. And I'll put the room code that I'll be in about, 3 or 4 minutes here as I transfer from the UploadVR studios here with David. I'll put the name of that room right in that article and I'll update it for you all. So we'll see you next Tuesday with VR Gamescast with Don Hopper, and then VR Download with David Heaney next Thursday. We're getting pretty good at this time, although I will be traveling next week, so David's going to have to figure that out next week. We haven't figured out that scheduling, so I'll be out and about. David will be in charge next week. So we'll see you. Thank you so much. Go check out that member post. I'll see you in Walkabout if you're a member. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much, everyone. And thank you, Apu, for being a good sport about that. Sorry for roasting you. I hope you get that PSVR 2 Pro someday. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.